And so as we've said a number of times before, usually when I do videos with you, we usually end up doing some kind of franchise of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
And we had talked a little bit, and Owen had talked about it a little bit, doing the Back to the Future trilogy. The trouble is we didn't really know what to do it with.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, why don't we just do the thing where we just do the franchise and the versus angle is 1, 2, and 3. That's enough.
Spoiler, for me it goes in the order 1, 2, 3.
That's probably the popular opinion, if I had to guess.
Yeah.
But you've said before that you consider Back to the Future, like, usually you say it's either your all-time favorite, but you kind of go back and forth between that and Lebowski. But you say it's pretty much this.
The 89 Batman comes up every once in a while, but it's usually Back to the Future or Lebowski. And we, since a couple months ago, we just rewatched Lebowski in theaters for the Fathom event. Like, Lebowski's a little bit ahead right now, but as soon as I pop in Back to the Future, it'll probably go back ahead.
I really wish you'd been there a few years ago when I got to see when they did that event on I think it was on the day of, where they showed the entire trilogy we didn't have to leave town. It was at our theater in like the big theater, and the only thing in between the movies was like those fake commercials for like hoverboards and the sneakers and all that.
That's neat.
And I don't know how this happened, but from when the first movie started to when 3 ended, I never got up. I didn't even go to the bathroom.
That's like 6 hours.
Yeah, my legs were fucking dead. Like, I could barely walk out of the theater itself. But that was like, that might be one of my favorite memories. There weren't a shitload of people, like there usually with these cases and around where we live, where like, when the first one started, there were maybe 35 to 40 people in there. By the time 3 ended, it was probably down to like 15. But
it's a marathon.
Yeah, and it's
a marathon in the truest sense.
It was incredible. It was kind of surreal, too, being in that theater and seeing these movies that we're so familiar with. In a way that I hadn't quite had with seeing the classics on the theater screen like we usually do. But since you consider the first one an all-time favorite, do you want to start with it?
Sure.
And then we'll go 1, 2, then 3.
Sure, that's fine. As far as the first one, I think from bell to bell, the first one is memorable. I think the concept's fun. I think it's interesting because every other movie I've ever seen that involves time travel is not good. Unless I'm not thinking of something.
Like any time travel movie?
Give me some time travel movies and I'll tell you if I like them.
12 Monkeys, Looper. You didn't see the original Time Machine?
No, I didn't. I only saw Guy Pearce's and I don't remember much about it.
Prisoner of Azkaban.
Looper's pretty good. Prisoner of Azkaban's kind of a stretch. But I mean, like, no, I thought, like, my first thought went to, like, Timeline.
Star Trek 4. Oh, I see what you mean now. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, where time traveling is the plot.
Okay.
Yeah, like there's a bunch of movies where it happens, but not many where the central focus of the movie is the fact that we have done it.
I feel like you've also got Guy Pearce's Time Machine in your head. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like this early 2000s era of time travel movies that you're thinking of.
Yeah, well, you said it yourself. I mean, you and I had many conversations. There wasn't really anything we could compare it to.
Yeah.
Other than itself. It's such a strange little animal.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes with the car. Like, there's nothing to compare it to.
And the crazy thing about it is usually with a movie like this that has such a big concept, you typically the writers would probably typically run out of ideas. And it would probably be like, maybe they, put all their eggs in one basket towards the beginning, but then by the end it's like you just don't have anything else to work with. And it's like, not only do they have all these great ideas, and like you would even think with all the ideas this movie has to go with this concept, at least 1 or 2 of them would like fall short, and you're like, well, I don't particularly care for that part, but this idea was really good or whatever. Like every idea that the movie has, comedic or creatively, works. And not only that, but they had enough material for 3 damn movies.
Yeah. I love how there's a lot of videos out there trying to find plot holes in the series.
Yeah.
Like, everybody's like, how did they not recognize Marty when he got older? Like, why is George McFly not questioning his paternity? Like,
well,
different stuff like that.
I just re-reviewed Looper a while back, or like last week or whatever, and I was basically talking about the fact that it's sort of like if you go into a time travel movie just to be like pedantic about the time travel, then you're not there for the movie.
No.
Because that's like a whole different thing. If you're gonna I love that Looper just basically said we're not gonna go into the mechanics because fuck that.
Yeah.
So when you just embrace it like that, I feel like, yeah. I mean, I guess because you have a character as science-based as Doc Brown, I guess maybe I can see where it might stick out a little more if the movie takes a little...
Yeah, but he's also nuts. Like, if Doc Brown was the one explaining the concept of time travel to you, do you think you'd understand?
Well, even he doesn't really believe it, because it's always been interesting to me that when Marty goes to him in 1955, and he's saying, like, you know, I came here in a time machine that you invented, and he doesn't believe it, yet he just had the flux capacitor vision. So it's like, why does he not believe Marty right away? It's like, even he thinks he's full of shit, kind of.
Yeah. Even Doc Brown is like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's like, I doubt I built a time machine. But yeah, and how it's able to make that kind of stuff just really work anyway, regardless of that stuff. And make this more or less... I was trying to think the other day of, like, where you'd even categorize it. Like, honestly, I think the category you'd put it in first and foremost is comedy.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you could say sci-fi or whatever, but that almost feels like a stretch.
Yeah.
Because once he gets to 1955, that's what the movie is.
Hell, the third one you could put in Western if you really wanted to make that argument.
Yeah. Definitely the closest one to actual sci-fi would be the second one.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so, especially with, like, the dystopian, like...
When Biff runs things.
Yeah, when Biff Trump runs things. I only say that because he looks like him. Like, the hair.
And and their vision of 2015, which obviously we know in some cases wasn't entirely off. We were just going to go one movie at a time, but we are kind of jumping around. So we'll end up where we end up. It doesn't matter.
But I think the first one, there's a lot of things that people... There's a lot of things in the first one you recognize. Even the opening scene. Like with all the clocks.
Yeah.
And everything. And then you go from there, you know, you meet the DeLorean, you do the scene where he gets shot by the Libyans, and we go back in time.
Really like? One of the more famous things to come out of the movie was Power of Love song. And what I really liked, and I talked about this too when we talked about Wayne's World, the Bohemian Rhapsody scene. Do you ever notice, I love that the Power of Love scene is its own scene. Because when you think of that, if your memory isn't quite completely there, you may think the Power of Love sequence is the opening credits. But it's not. The opening credits are like the very first thing, and then that's
if
like
I remember right, the opening credits there's no music.
It's just the clocks, yeah.
Yeah.
And then that's its own like introductory sequence to show
Which
Marty
in a way kind of sets an interesting tone. Because it's clocks.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Well, the clocks, you can hear the clocks ticking when that shows the title.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume Zemeckis meant that.
But there's so much going on in the first one. You have the scene where you have, Marty falling out of the tree, and he's up in his mom's bed, and then you have the school dance, which is...
It does make you... And another thing they kind of play up in an interesting way, and it's like amazing that it actually works, is the way George is portrayed in that moment. Because here's the thing. Because we know... that this sequence is supposed to have George in that tree spying on her. And the thing is it starts off with them in the diner, and then, George gets pissed off and he leaves and he takes off on his bike. And then, like, the very next cut is Marty finding him in the tree. So it's like George's thought process at the diner was, I need to get out of here. I'm going to haul ass to Lorraine's house, get up that tree before Marty gets there, and already be doing my thing when he shows up.
It's almost like he was pre-programmed to do that.
And it's like, just how much of a creeper is he? I mean, you could chalk it up to his awkwardness. Or the fact that it's in the 50s. The 50s is such, like, a scapegoat for bad behavior.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Because, like, a lot of, like... Like, if something racist happens in a movie, you're like, oh, it was the 50s, okay.
Oh God, they're
That's
watching.
what that happens.
And obviously they're watching The Honeymooners. Wasn't The Honeymooners like? Wasn't Ralph Cramden's thing like? I'm gonna beat the shit out of my wife, and it's hilarious.
Yeah. Oh,
but it's like,
the 50s.
But it's like 1985 wasn't quite new enough to be able to satirize that a little farther. But
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, it probably would have, you know, sidetracked us a little too much. We've got plenty of other taboo things going on here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, for instance, the scene right before that is him waking up next to Lorraine and what goes on with that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also, in the way that, like, we get to see the interesting things that change from what we know in the opening scenes to what happens in 1955 once Marty gets there. Like, how much Lorraine is obviously different, because at the very beginning she's talking, like, girls shouldn't chase boys and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what does she do the second she meets Marty? She's, like, that person.
She's almost like the crazy, clingy one, yeah.
And what do you, I guess there's the performances in general, too, I think really stand out. Like, it's one of those cases where you can't really imagine anybody else in any of the parts. Despite what happened to Crispin Glover in the other two movies still. Like, Michael J. Fox in particular.
Yeah, but even then, they just, like, the last two, they just eliminated George.
Yeah.
Like,
I wonder what else he would have done. Like, he's in the second one, but it's like, he just has some background lines, more or less. But the thing about Michael J. Fox, too, is, like, it's
I
really
wonder if
hard
there was
to...
more of a subplot involved with him that had to be cut because Crispin Glover didn't want to come back.
Surely. Well, it's not that he didn't want to come back, I think. I think it was like he wanted too much money thing. He said in an interview a while back, like a radio interview about... He told the whole story about how Zemeckis got, like, really pissed off at him. But the thing about Michael J. Fox basically being synonymous with this part was, you think about the fact that obviously there's the whole... Talking about actors getting ousted from the series.
Eric Stoltz.
How Tom Wilson had a whole... He was doing a Q&A with Christopher Lloyd, Tom Wilson, who plays Biff. And he basically told the whole story about how he got the call one day, and they're like, we need you to come in. And he could have sworn that he was getting fired. And the news was, we had to fire Eric Stoltz, and you got to redo all your scenes. And it was like... Because I guess he was just being like... He was trying to be all method to play Marty McFly. And it was like, he was basically just pissing everybody off. And then Matthew Modine recently told a story where he was saying that he was offered Marty McFly, I think even before Eric Stoltz, but the problem was that Back to the Future had Spielberg's name all over it in pre-production. So when Modine showed up, he was under the impression he was doing a Spielberg movie. And they said, no, it's Robert Zemeckis, Spielberg's just producing. Now, of course, this is 1985. So Matthew Modine's response was, who the fuck is Robert Zemeckis? Which he deeply regrets. Because he did... Romancing the Stone had come out the year before and was a big deal. But I would say probably around the time they were casting Back to the Future, Romancing the Stone may not have been out yet. So the only thing he had was Used Cars with Kurt Russell and I Want to Hold Your Hand, which is a movie about girls going to see the Beatles. So it's easy to see where that would come from. But still, even...
Modine turned out okay a couple of years later as far as wanting to work with a director he'd heard of.
Yeah.
I think it worked out well.
So,
which his career's kind of been an interesting little... It's been an interesting career.
Yeah, he's got a lot of art house stuff in the middle there.
Yeah.
But
then he has stuff like Pacific Heights.
Which still is Schlesinger, who did Midnight Cowboy.
Yeah.
We're going way off on this Matthew Modine thing.
He's got The Dark Knight Rises. He's got...
He did an Altman movie.
He's in Stranger Things.
Yeah. That's like what brought him back.
Have you seen Stranger Things?
I saw season 1.
He's really good in it. he's a very good villain.
So, with that said, how do you feel about Michael J. Fox?
Someone else that's had an interesting career path, as I just watched The Frighteners a couple weeks ago for Halloween.
Yeah. Have you seen the outtakes from The Frighteners?
No.
Where he, like, it's not even a joke, like, sincerely, he got so used to it. There's like a whole outtake reel from The Frighteners where he keeps calling people Doc.
Oh,
because he's just so used to it.
That's funny. I didn't know that existed. But I think Michael J. Fox gives off the right personality for Marty.
Yeah, he's got like that...
Like, he's cocky when he's comfortable.
Yeah. but it's also like he has different degrees of cockiness because there's like just how he basically treats his surroundings in general. Like even with that opening scene when we see the way he gets to school, he even has the balls to grab into a police car to do it.
But at the same time, I know this is probably a nitpick, and I've seen this complaint in other places. And the second and third one where chicken is like a trigger word for him, I feel like that's very like cliche.
Yeah, but what's interesting though is when you look back on it, there are so many clues to it. I'm trying to figure out because obviously 2 and 3 were shot back to back.
Yeah,
it's like they were pretty much a whole thing together at the time. But I'm wondering just how much they had that idea because obviously most of the build up to it is in 2. You'll see a lot of clues to it, like when obviously they were already setting it up when we get Biff's entire history and they talk about Mad Dog briefly, and then there's the thing when he's playing the arcade game, the scene with Elijah Wood in it in the second movie in the diner, and it's like a Western themed game of him shooting like cowboys and shit.
Yeah,
and it's like I wonder like because the chicken thing like perfectly sets up that he's gonna be in a Western at some point. So it's like I'm wondering just how much that idea was there at all by the time they got to that, or if that's just a happy accident or whatever.
Yeah.
So another thing about the first one would probably be there's a lot of like some of those more what I like about it is it has those heartfelt moments, but they're not like blatant. You have to like catch them. Where we've got like the way because at the beginning obviously it is sort of like in It's a Wonderful Life sort of thing where he sees his life in one way at the beginning, and then he goes through the change, and then he sees his life in a whole different way afterwards. But especially the way he views George, and how like George is like the least relatable person to him at the start of it. But then when we get to the point in the middle where Marty almost barely acknowledges it, where we get moments like it might seem blatant once you realize it, but they go by so quickly too. Where it's at the beginning when he's talking about his band and how they get rejected, and he's telling Jennifer, it's like, I just couldn't take that kind of rejection if they told me I suck. And George says that exact same thing about why he doesn't go farther with his sci-fi writing.
Yeah.
And it's like there's definitely that connection there, but they don't draw attention to it in this blatant emotional way. And I think that kind of makes it even more potent that they do it that way.
Yeah.
And then there is the stuff that they seem to draw a bit more attention to, but they're still not, overly in your face about it. Like, Marty's relationship with Doc is a lot more, like, strong than it may seem like it's letting on. Especially when he spends the whole 1955 segment of the first movie knowing what Doc's outcome is. And there's that really sort of heartfelt moment. Like I said, they don't, hit you over the head with when he's getting ready to go back in time, and he tells 1955 Doc, I'm really going to miss you. And it's like he's also talking to the one that he knows is dead already. It's like that hits you in a nice place. Or in a sad place, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
So to look for that kind of stuff also, amidst all the comedic setups they have going on with this also. So what else about the first one comes to mind for you?
There's just so many, like, I don't know, I feel like you could, if you sat down and think about it and you've seen it enough, like, you wouldn't have to watch it over and over again to know, like, you could pick out probably a handful of scenes that you could remember almost verbatim.
Yeah.
Like how it goes down. Like
it's one of those movies where like almost any scene in the entire movie could be referenced in another movie or show or whatever, and you instantly get it.
Yeah.
I actually got mad at Teen Titans Go to the Movies.
And even itself.
Yeah. Where like the waking up next to Lorraine is like a continuous thing throughout all three. And another running joke I kind of like that's just sort of there is the way Marty's always surprised by Biff's size.
Yeah.
No matter how many times he confronts him, it's like just him disappearing over Biff's shoulder. And then Griff does that where he like can like electronically raise himself.
Yeah.
In the second one.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I was gonna go into this a little later, but I mean, I guess we can go into it now. Am I alone in thinking Tom Wilson's the unsung hero of these movies?
That he's what?
The unsung hero of these movies.
Yeah, he is a lot of fun.
Not just because he's it's a funny performance, but the thing is it's so many different performances.
He's wearing a lot of hats,
and he's got not just every role of his requires a different voice or all that, but every role he does requires a whole new physicality.
Even Biff from even the 1985 Biffs, the Biff we first meet, Biff when Marty makes the future better, and Biff when Biff takes over the future. It's 3 different characters. I mean, if you just look at what Thomas Wilson has to do, how many, I know Eddie Murphy's played a lot of characters in movies, and this may be kind of cheating, but for Thomas Wilson, you've got the 3 Biffs, you've got first time 1955 Biff, second time 1955 Biff, who's a little bit different because of what he's experienced. You've got Griff, you've got Mad Dog Tannen, you've got... That's 7 right there.
What's
and
really...
all 7 of those guys are completely different.
What's really a joy is when they interact.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why, but one of my favorite moments,
mm-hmm.
I think it's just his delivery, I guess,
mm-hmm.
but it's when, in the second one, when the older Biff gets a hold of the almanac, and he's already in his car, and he's
mm-hmm.
gonna try to get him to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Just the way he walks up to the car, and he's like, hey, come here, I want to show you something. And he's like, get the hell out of my car, old man! And when it's somewhere at some point, before he got old, Biff finally learned that it was make like a tree and leave instead of get out of here.
Yeah.
And then I just love, he's amazing in the third movie. It's even his voice starts to change, and he's got that different sort of Western-like way about him.
Mm-hmm.
I love the moment when he has to, schedule when he's going to kill Marty.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, we're going to, we're going to meet, tonight. And then he's like, oh, you mean at high noon? And it's like, oh, no, I'm going to kill you tomorrow. And it's like, no, we're robbing that bank tomorrow. I'm going to kill you Monday. Are we doing anything Monday? And he's still able to make it comedic while also just going as over the top as possible.
Yeah.
He's almost too over the top as Griff. Since when did you become the physical type? He's about to pop something as Griff. But when you just look at it all as one performance,
mm-hmm.
it's amazing. Especially when it's in the first movie, all he really gets to do is
standard bully.
Yeah, because when he's old Biff and when he's middle-aged douchebag Biff, he's barely there. So he's mostly just the 1955 version.
Mm-hmm.
And it's you don't really suspect what all he's capable of until it branches off.
Mm-hmm.
So he's always something I really look forward to when I
they could have easily used different actors, but it just wouldn't have been the same.
Yeah, because you could say to an extent, obviously Michael J. Fox also plays all his different family members,
mm-hmm.
his own daughter, his own son, his own.
Yeah, but that goes more into Eddie Murphy territories.
Yeah, and even Leah Thompson also, when she gets to put on the accent in 3 and all that.
Mm.
But most of that is just makeup and accents. I feel like Tom Wilson's doing a whole different thing every time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's yeah.
And it's not just that. It's when Michael J. Fox plays all of his family members. How long does that scene last? Maybe a couple minutes.
That and it's one scene.
Yeah.
He has to do it a lot more in 3 because he has to play the other dude.
Yeah.
But
Thomas Wilson's doing it throughout the entire series.
Yeah. And back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, I've always wanted to get that off my chest because he's somebody that I don't really hear a lot of gratitude for how well this turned out in his direction.
Yeah.
He does have I don't know if it's a stand-up routine or what it is, but he has a song that he sings because he's pretty much known for Back to the Future. He's done he was the coach on Freaks and Geeks. He's done a lot of SpongeBob voices.
Mm-hmm.
He was in April Fool's Day, a horror movie. He was in Let's Get Harry, which was this war kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But he gets so many of the same questions about Back to the Future, he just sang a song about it. What each question is and what the answer is.
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, he started putting it on business cards and just handing them to people with it. Which seems dickish, but I hear he's a really nice guy.
That's what I've heard too.
Which makes it even better that Biff's such a douchebag.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
So on top of that, there's also actually somebody, since we only really get to talk about him once. Another person I kind of skipped over was Crispin Glover, who actually like. It's kind of interesting that he's known for playing the parts that he's known for now, like being the weird guy. Because I mean, yeah, obviously George, you know.
Does Friday the 13th Part 4 count? That dancing.
Actually, George feels more like an extension of I think Jimmy was his name in that.
Yeah.
They feel like more of an extension of each other. It's like he played Jimmy, then he played George McFly, and then River's Edge happened, and then he just got River's Edge parts forever. But the thing here was I
don't know. I could see George McFly creeping in the tree, becoming Crispin Glover and like Mike.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, obviously, apart from the fact that George is a creeper, it's definitely like you do like sympathize for him because he's just such a lost cause.
Yeah. He's like in the video we were talking about before. He's a lot like Smalls in that way.
And the way that the way he's able to like vanish into the background, where like the first time he goes up to Lorraine when he's trying to introduce them. And he like leans up against the locker, but then of course she's all about Marty, and you just kind of have to watch him in the background the way he just subtly, like slowly, and like in a very embarrassed way, just creeps away. He does it again outside the diner after the whole chase thing, when he tried the density thing. He just disappears with his pathetic little notebook, and it's really sad. It's like when he does the milk chocolate thing. Even when he's trying to be all smooth, it's still dorky as hell. But in kind of an endearing way.
Yeah.
To the point to where it's like, it is like a really nice triumphant moment when he does get to knock Biff the fuck out. So,
would you consider, since this has become so popular, would you consider the Back to the Future movies kind of like their own little cinematic universe, the way that all the events connect together?
In a sense, in the way that it has like a definitive end. Because I know you've talked about your. You're not all about the ending of 3. But, you know, if you watch them back, I do see, like... Because for a while there, we always hated the Mary Steenburgen story. And how it seemed like it kind of ruined Doc's arc a little bit. But I do think it actually works a lot in retrospect. I mean, maybe it's Mary Steenburgen's performance you don't like. That totally could be it. Because what happens here that I really like, is, and the way it gives the story closure also, is that, yeah, it can seem a bit much like we're going towards the end of the franchise. It should be getting real big, and it's like, Doc gets a love story, really. But when you think about it, this started with, well, we see Marty and Jennifer for a little bit, but then we get into, like, George and Lorraine's love story and all that. And then as 2 goes on, we realize where Marty and Jennifer end up. It's like, there is something romantic about that. Like, their, you know, seemingly regular teenager romance does end up with them, you know, married with children and all that stuff. And you look at all these people with all these people in their lives, and throughout the whole, you know, thing of this, Doc's been alone. And like he's the only person he has is Marty, and that's what makes their relationship so good. So it's like he's got Einstein, I guess. But, or what was it, Copernicus is his dog in 55. Yeah. So it's like, for Doc to also have that where he also has, like, his family, even if it's, you know, even if he's time hopping now, just for whatever. It's just sort of a nice closure for everybody. Because that would have been kind of sad if we had all of these romantic endings and Doc's just still alone. That would have kind of sucked.
And, you know, to be fair, I mean, it's a series that essentially... How do I word this to where it doesn't come off like I'm completely dumb?
Oh, God.
I feel like until Doc Brown, there is not a love story, because I don't consider George and Lorraine a love story. I see that as putting a puzzle back together.
Marty's conflict?
Yeah. I don't see it as much as a love story, because there's no love there. He just pretty much has to get her attention. That's all there is to it.
I actually totally get kind of what you mean in regards to how it's Marty's conflict and not the conflict of the movie. Was one of the scenes at the end that I always love in the first movie was when they're playing Earth Angel and it looks like Marty's getting ready to disappear, and then George comes back and he kisses her. And it's like the big moment of that scene, the scene that just really, you know, takes that scene to another level, isn't that George and Lorraine kiss. It's that the picture's restored.
Yeah.
And that's what we wanted.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of... So I see where I definitely see where you're coming from with that.
Yeah. It doesn't... I mean, it's trying to get two people to fall in love with each other, but it's not necessarily for them to be in love. It's just to pretty much keep Marty intact.
Yeah, because as you said, all it takes is him like punching Biff, and then end of story.
Yeah, we don't dive into it anymore. Then we go right into, okay, how do I get home?
Yeah, because there is that one moment too where it's like you can tell they're using it for conflict, because it's like after he's just knocked out Biff, there's that point in time where just that random dude, you know, cuts in while they're dancing, and George almost gives up again. And it's like, why is that even in there?
Yeah.
It's like just for that one more sliver of suspense to make it look like Marty might not make it. And then when George just comes back, and it's like, okay.
I do kind of see where it's important, because Marty had to coach George the whole way up to Biff, and I think that's the reassurance that that's not going to happen to George anymore. Like, that guy cutting in is a way of saying George can now handle this on his own.
Yeah, because when he confronted Biff, he didn't even mean to. He thought it was Marty.
Yeah.
They were gonna fake it. So yeah, that makes sense.
So does that kind of give that scene meaning for you now?
Yeah.
Okay. There.
Good. Maybe that scene's perfect to me now, and I can now forever can watch that scene not going, why though?
Yeah. Now you can see it as, oh, this is where we find out that George is going to be able to handle his shit.
Yeah.
Glad I could clear that up for you. That doesn't happen very often. I don't normally get to clear things up for you.
Yeah, you were talking about stuff also that comes back. I also like, we definitely didn't go with the 1, 2, 3 thing. We're just jumping around, but some of
you kind of have to, because it's kind of presented as a linear story. Like, even though 2 and 3 were filmed later, the beginning of 2 is the ending of 1.
Yeah, you'd never believe like how many years are between 1 and 2. Like, as it all feels so cohesive. But
except for Elizabeth Shue coming in.
Yeah. But then you could just chalk that up to something that happened in time or something.
Yeah.
But the thing also
I've actually seen that used as a theory that somebody said that when Marty fixed the future to make it better for him, he made Jennifer prettier. Like, I've seen that theory. And I was like, that's harsh. Elizabeth Shue is prettier than the first girl, but still, that's a harsh theory.
But there's also the stuff you were talking about that comes back, but in a way, like... Because usually sequels tend to get shit for bringing stuff back from the original movie, but the way this movie does it, it's just some of those little references. Like, I love when Doc does the same reference in the first one and the third one, when he's talking about how he's going to make the time machine work in the era that they're in. And it's always, please excuse the crudity of the model. And it's this really elaborate... like, really detailed thing. I also love the when he said the famous line at the end of 1 when he says, "Where we're going, we don't need roads." We know what that means because they're flying. And it's like he says the same thing about 3, but in a totally different context. But it's the same line.
Yeah. Like, it's more or less, he could have easily just said 2. It wouldn't have been as effective. But where we're going, we don't have roads yet.
Yeah. And talking about, we were talking before about Doc and how he basically, like, he gets kind of a big arc in 3. It's like that's kind of the one arc we haven't gotten yet in the series. Well, no, he did come back from the dead, but like a more, well, yeah, one for like his character to continue.
There's a mini arc there where he got over the stubbornness of science and his survival instinct kicked in.
Yeah, but then there is a moment where we get to see different sides of Doc in the third movie we haven't seen yet. I've got to tell you, I don't know how much you remember of it. The scene in 3 when Doc goes to the bar is the gift that keeps on giving.
Okay, please explain.
Okay,
it's been a little bit since I've seen 3.
So it's after Clara gets mad at him and slaps him and says, "Go away," because he tried to convince her of the time machine thing, and she thought he was fucking with her love of
Is that the slap that was on the repeater for a while?
Yes.
Okay.
But then there was, he goes to the bar, and the first thing he does is he, like, orders whiskey, and they're like, whoa, he never orders whiskey, and it's like, this is what happened on the 4th of July. Don't let what happened on the 4th of July happen. And it's like, what the fuck happened on the 4th of July? But then, the joke later on is, like, it's the whole other day now. Like, the sun has risen, and he's at the bar, he's got his whiskey, and he's telling them about the future. and what all's there. It's like, I would have loved to see more of that too, him telling the guys from the West about the future, and they just think he's drunk. And then it's like, Marty walks in and sees this, and they're like, oh my god, how much has he had? And it's like, he's just been holding that, he hasn't drinking it. And then it's like, okay, well, I guess it's time to face the music, and he takes the drink, and they're like, Doc, no, and just taking that tiny shot of whiskey, he face plants through the table. And then after he's passed out, they're like, oh, here's the wake-up juice. And he drinks it, and he, like, sits up and screams like Mia Wallace, runs outside of the bar, and dives into a trough of water. And then Marty's like, he's still passed out. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's just a reflex. That scene is just one amazing joke after the next until the showdown with Mad Dog Cannon. So yeah, and like that's the part where it should be the downtime. That should be where he goes and sulks about Mary Steenburgen, and it's one of the funniest scenes in the whole series because it's just one right after the other. And then I do like some of the jokes they have towards the Western angle and like the era where it's obviously Mad Dog Cannon's this big dude. I love the way that he keeps calling him dude too. But it's like where he says something like, hey, you need to lighten up, jerk. And sincerely Mad Dog Cannon says, those are strong words. That's more.
It sounds like you had some fun with 3 the last time you watched it.
Yeah, 3 is also the one where they get to toy with the lines more, where the line switch, where it's Marty that says "Grace God" and Doc says "This is heavy."
Yeah,
it's like in another series that would be so like lame and cheesy, but for some reason, I guess because the characters are so like part of this machine now that we are able to embrace it in a way that we may not have in another franchise or another trilogy.
There's some characters too that make it a lot of fun to see them in the different time frames, like the principal from the school. Like in the Biff future, he's like got like a shotgun and shit.
Still calling people slackers, even though the school's been closed for like 6 years or something.
And then in the Old West, he's what, the sheriff in the Old West? Is that what it was?
Something like that. He's some kind of authority figure. He's the one. I think he's the one that like takes their guns away and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he's talking about he's talking to the kid about like remember discipline. It's like we see where the chain reaction happened.
I think what's also interesting is when I very first watched Back to the Future, like when I first watched it, I don't even remember when that was. Was it what, middle school maybe?
Probably. It probably would have been shortly after I discovered them. And I went back one at a time and got each one from the video store. I didn't get them all at once for some reason. I think I liked the idea of going to the video store for each one, and it was like a whole thing.
But it's interesting because like the one thing that I did know about Back to the Future before that was the car. And what surprises me when you go and watch the movies is just how little most of the time the car is broken. Like, they're not doing anything with it because it's broken.
To my understanding, that's the way the DeLoreans really works, too.
Yeah. Now, it seems to be the most functional in 2. And then in 3, it just goes all to hell. Like, because it's like, oh, it's out of gas. And it's like, we're in the 1800s. This isn't an easy problem to fix.
I also love that one of the big things is, like finalizing this decision of the time machine must be destroyed because we've done way too much and fucked way too much up and it's getting way too dangerous. And they do end up destroying the time machine, but it's by convenience. He just happens to be on a train track that's got another one going in that direction. He didn't have to worry about how he was going to do that. But there's also, you talk about the second one. You know what I really like? Like, obviously, we were saying we pretty much like them in chronological order. Like, the first is the best, the second best, the third is third best. But there's something that the second one has that you kind of really miss in the other two. And that's how we get, like, how we were talking about how most of the first movie is 55. And then most of the third movie is 1885. The second one gets to go everywhere all the time.
Yeah, it's pretty spread out. Probably... I would guess it spends the least amount of time in 2015.
Yeah, because we go to
2015, we solve that, and that kind of resolves that. So then we go back to 1985, we realize it's screwed up, so then we have to go back to 1955 to fix it, and then go back to 1985 to bring us back to square one.
Don't you love the little things they throw in there that so subtly you don't even realize just how important they're going to be? Especially when they start off as a joke, like when he gets the almanac. They're like, yeah, this is a dust jacket. They used to have these things. Like, look at this. They used to call this a dustbuster. It's like we just see that as a joke. We don't realize that the dust jacket is going to come into play. Because he's going to think that he has it when he doesn't.
Yeah.
And the thing also, and the way they sort of, like, use that in obviously they do this in 3 also, which is kind of even more weird, but the way they kind of splice together too, like how he has to use the hoverboard while he's chasing Biff in 1955 and stuff like that, and how they like kind of start to mix together a little bit. It's like that's something that would have been really cool to see more of. Yeah. And I think that's why a lot of people were disappointed in 3 that it's just set in one era. It feels like very limiting, especially because it's 1885.
Well, the hoverboard does make an appearance.
Yeah, on the
in the 1800s. Yeah.
But and also the way they sort of put that together too, where we see him in 2 in 1, and he like almost runs into himself. When he hits himself with the door, is always going to be hilarious. Sometimes it's a little rough. Like I think it still got an Oscar nomination for visual effects, but every now and then, like you can tell where the fake Crispin Glover is. You can tell where they tried to splice together footage from 2 and 1. The most blatant one probably is. When it's like, after he is punched Biff, and in the background we totally hear not Crispin Glover say, "Are you okay?" in this very weird voice. It's like, who the hell dubbed that? But I mean, but still, it still works a lot. And like I said, it really makes you kind of wish we got more of that kind of, you know, shuffling the timelines a little bit more, but... And that kind of is like solely 2's thing. Yeah. And seeing the old one where I was talking about you. We were talking on the phone while I was watching the second one last week. And it was like, I always tend to forget just how dire everything is when Biff's in charge. And it's like when Marty says, like, you know, I feel like we're in hell. It's like, that's believable. That's what that feels like. Yeah. So, do you have much of anything else?
I hope they never remake it.
Zemeckis, like, signed something where, like, as long as Zemeckis is alive, they can't. I'm not sure how old Zemeckis is. But
somebody find him some just because I feel like this is a movie that everybody's just, like, waiting for Zemeckis to die so they can tackle it. Although, I will give it this. It would probably be good for 1 joke, maybe 2. But it would be fun to, like... I guess I could see, like, Marty being somebody that's, like, a person today that's, like, obsessed with their cell phone and trying to adjust to not having it. Like, oh, let me Google it. Why can't I get Wi-Fi? But that, like I said, that would be good for, like, 1 joke.
That's basically what the new Jumanji did with the Jack Black character.
Really?
So,
so there you go. That joke's not even usable. Yeah. But...
Well, that wouldn't stop Hollywood, of course, but, you know.
No, no. And they'll screw up the casting, like, even if they did, like... Like, I don't know of anybody right now that could pull off Doc Brown.
Oh... Not off the top. There's got to be somebody, but not off the top of my head.
We should make this a new video series where we take movies that we love and recast them.
Oh my god. I'm sure that would go over so well.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Another unsung hero of this series we didn't talk about. I think he took that guy's wallet guy. That guy deserves an entire spotlight. I love how certain he is the last time. I think he took his wallet. After it starts, I think he took his wallet. When it's... So, is that about it here? We were all over the damn place here, but hopefully we got something out.
Yeah. So. Basically, it's a series that it does get weaker as it goes, but it doesn't get so weak to the point that it tarnishes the whole thing.
I'm interested how you'd feel if you watched 3 again. Yeah. The last time was probably, what, years ago?
It's probably been a couple years.
Yeah. I noticed that in the theater too, though. It's like Tom Wilson alone is the reason to watch 3, but it's got plenty. So the bar scene, of course.
But yeah, I think it's one of those movies that, you know, it's, you know, for a while you kind of had it and Die Hard that had like the right amount of movies where, like, it did get, but then they kept making Die Hard, and thankfully they haven't done that with this, which, honestly, I mean, I don't see any way they could. I mean, the ending is just so defined.
Yeah. It's like, even though he destroys the time machine, and it's like, that feels definitive enough, but then when we realize that the train can do it, it's like, that's just such a cool reveal in itself that it's like, I'm okay with there still being a time machine, especially if he's going to use it for whatever it is he's going to do seems positive. So
yeah, it seems like he just wants to be an observer at this point.
Yeah.
Like, not mess with things. I mean, I guess you could say, like, oh my god, Marty, I found this with your grandkids. But no, why go there?
And usually it was Marty that made things worse. Like, Marty was the one that bought the almanac and all that.
But yeah, like somebody...
the second movie should have been so easy.
Actually, there's a lot of theories that say that the second one shouldn't have even happened. That Doc Brown should have pulled up and been like, hey Marty, heads up, when you have kids, don't do this. Or somebody, I read a theory online once, it was like Back to the Future could be solved with one thing. Doc coming back in the DeLorean, Marty, after you get married, move out of Hill Valley. And that would have been the end of it.
But, of course, where's the fun in that?
Yeah,
so.
then you wouldn't have gotten your bar scene you love in 3 so much. But yeah, overall, I mean, it's a series I think holds up really well as a whole. I think that's why it's also one of the few that you can find all of them together packaged, and all of them are like a feature. It's not like your Karate Kid box set where you have Karate Kid 1 and then Karate Kid 2 and then Karate Kid 3 and 4 on the same disc, just flip it over and it's in a little section back here. But no, this highlights all of them.
And what I was talking about with my very awesome theatrical experience was they didn't just play... They could have just played part 2, which is kind of what I thought they would do, but the whole damn thing is how it should be seen. So, yeah. And this was also one of those things where, like, you kind of just... Like, usually when a movie is, like, this beloved or this classic or whatever, sometimes there's the possibility of overhype, or maybe you're not going to love it as much, like, immediately. But these are movies that it's just, you immediately fall in love with them.
Yeah.
Like when I said I would go to the video store for each one, it's like I couldn't wait to get 2, and then after 2 I couldn't wait to get 3. And I vividly remember the first time I saw all 3 of them. So, yeah.
But yeah, overall, fun set of movies. And I think there is only one way to end this video to suit this.
You've been looking awfully mischievous, I'm afraid. Oh my god.